So anyway, it's great to see you guys, and I'm just gonna kind of blast you through a couple projects. I'm kind of feeling down on my work these days, so I know, but I have a couple tiny new things that I'm kind of happy to debut here that most people haven't seen. In fact, something I know no one's seen yet except Kyle. So I'm psyched to share some tasty new tidbits. First of all, though, I'd like to. Today's talk is sort of back and forth between information visualization and sort of gestural interactive art, and somewhere in between those things is where today's talk is going to land. I'm going to show a bunch of projects, some of which are like so old that they're not even just old projects, they're actually just like fucking funny. Like more just to kind of show you where I came from. But this is a project, so these are a pair of hands, and if you can't tell, the open-ended group, which some friends of mine in Boston, recorded Merce Cunningham's hand data from a motion capture system shortly before he passed away. And through George Fifield and the Boston Cyber Arts Festival, they commissioned myself and Casey and a number of other artists, So Limited and Brian Knepp, to interpret this data. And for me, this was a profound opportunity to kind of to give Merce Cunningham back a body that he had lost. And so this data, which was completely virtual information, became scaffolded, became the scaffolding for this kind of three-dimensional re-bodification, if you will, that you see here, this sort of friendly. And so here's Merce. This is what the data looks like. This is as recorded by the open-ended group, and he is about 93 when he's recording this, 94 years old. And he's not able to dance anymore, but had spent so much of his life thinking about movement that he just would move in any way that he can. And in this case, it's his hands. So this is one form of visualization. I'm interested in visualizations both of the individual, as you see here, or the individual using an interactive project, as much as society. I have done some large-scale information visualizations involving sometimes millions or even billions of pieces of data. And I think of it kind of as a sort of self-examination for society, particularly when I put on my artistic mindset and I think like what's worth visualizing and why, and how can that kind of awaken us from our slumber and get us to think about the world in new ways. And for me, the purposes of an information visualization is less to do something useful. Lord knows I'm not doing any of that, but rather to kind of provoke us into thinking about the world in new ways and maybe seeing ourselves from a new angle. Like, never knew I looked like that. So I'm going to show a really old project called The Secret Lives of Numbers. If you go to Google or something like that, you type in something up there, then you'll get something over here. And the number up there tells you the number of web pages that contain that term. You know this. And no one actually expects you, of course, to look at like 84 million web pages. In fact, actually, they won't show you past the first 1,000. It just stops. But that number is sort of a metric of how good your search is, whether it's like, I search for Michael Jackson, he's more popular than I am, no surprise. He's got a bigger number there. What's interesting is that this number exists for any possible search that you could make. So for the number 910, you get this. For the number 912, you get 69 million. And then something special happens with 9/11. And it's because it's a Porsche automobile. I don't know. It's a bunch of different reasons. Oh, right, September 11th. And so what we have here somehow is this number that indicates something special in our collective consciousness about the use of this number to represent a major disaster, a special date, an emergency code, all kinds of different things. So this project was called The Secret Lives of Numbers, and I started collecting data for it back in 1997, and I collected it every few years. Every year I'd drop in and do another scrape of another bunch of data. And basically it's the popularity, if you call that number the popularity, of every number from 1 to 1,000,000. And there you can see on this kind of chart that I created in the project that the number 911 is certainly more popular than its neighbors. I'm going to run through the piece just for a split second to show maybe one or two strange things. Let's get it. Here we go. over here, we have this kind of spike, and you can see like, oh, like look, there's like the years, you know, and all the numbers that make up the fabric of our daily lives, the tax forms like, you know, 1040 that make up the fabric of our life, the zip codes, the area codes that are somehow more important because they show up in our lives more frequently. 90210 shows up there. It's like, it's the Hollywood zip codes, right? The years that matter more, 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and 1776 and 1945. And then little lumps that indicate, you know, that remind us that we have a base 10 numbering system, like 10 fingers, 10 toes, and therefore we see special spikes on multiples and powers of 10. But I'd like to bring your attention to something that Martin Wattenberg pointed out to me. He discovered this in the data. This here is this diagonal line, okay? So here the numbers are just oriented in rows of 100, 0 to 99, 100 to 199. And this bunch of numbers here, those are 4-digit numbers that rhyme, okay? Like the number like 3131 or 4646. And I think that these are more popular simply because they're easier to remember. Like if you're a taxi company or a pizza place, right? You want to have these kinds of numbers in your phone number or something. But it's just a kind of a way of thinking that sometimes numbers are more popular in the way that they reflect, you know, they're out there. They're more popular because of some tendency of the human mind to love things that are simple or simpler. All right, let's close that. Go back to this. All right, so low tech is cool too. Did you guys see this? Okay, it went out last week. This is my InfoVis graffiti. It's a pie chart that is rapidly deployable in public space. And the idea is, I've been thinking recently about locative, or what you might call situated information visualization. And it's this idea not only about what's worth visualizing and why, but also where. I thought Natalie did a really nice job talking about this with her sort of her buoys that revealed dissolved oxygen in situ. And the question I have is, you know, why don't we see more infographics in public space? We're now incredibly visually literate, thanks to New York Times and thanks to so many other forces, thanks to what everyone here is working on, that we live and breathe infographics now. So the idea of this was sort of a laser-cut pie chart that you could rapidly reassemble into different kinds of patterns so that you could go around sort of tagging the world with infographics that we're now able to read. And I don't think that the full potential is really realized yet here. For me, this is going to be, this was like a quick 4-hour project, just like from design to laser cut to quick experiment tag. For me, the full potential of this will really be the case when the graphic that you're seeing here is tightly coupled in its meaning and its provocation to the site where it's located. So more about that later. This is project, as I mentioned, is what I would call InfoVis graffiti. Later in this talk, I'll return to computation and present some new work in what I would call graffiti InfoVis. But first, I'd like to divert and talk about some other major interests of mine, namely gestural interaction with abstract form. I'd like to begin with this project here that I made as a child, which I later found out was a cover version of a project by Nam June Paik, TV Magnet, which you see here. How many of you have done this? Okay, you are like the last generation to do so. Just think, right? Like your children will never know like the joy of holding up a magnet to a cathode ray tube. Okay, it's just not, they're not going to have any idea about it. But when you do this, there's a magical thing that happens. It's as much a visualization of a completely invisible phenomenon as an interactive performance instrument. And I was 6 years old when I discovered this for myself, as happens, the same way that I thought I invented video feedback. Boy, that was, I was like, wow, mind-blowing. But what's great is, just how it was this quick and instant immersion in instantaneously responsive dynamic form. My mom being an abstract painter, I was like, whoa, this is even better because I'm controlling it. So that's sort of what got me thinking about interactive abstract dynamic form and has been a lifelong and abiding interest ever since. But also this notion of visualizing the invisible that we see, and that many of us do. Next project. This is the Alive project at MIT Media Lab, 1992. This is a trip down memory lane. This is literally my first coding project. Processing was a decade away from existing almost, or so. And I think I'm just 20 years old or so. here, and I had really hardly any programming experience, but they asked me to make these interactive creatures that were going to be tracked. And I did not make the vision tracking system here.
Here's a prototype of another system where we have a set of blob-like creatures, which eventually will have faces bitmapped upon them, which do things like follow the user's hand and so on. So if the user moves around, the blobs will actually slowly sort of
now,
follow.
I should just like to say,
the user's hand.
okay. Now, those of you who know, you know that okay, first of all, I love blobs, and this is just proof that I was just like, I can't get them out of my head. It's just been almost 20 years now. I was still thinking about blobs. A couple things pointing out here. The tracking system here, which basically is now like a page of code in processing. I showed it to you today in class. This was like 5 PhD students working on the vision tracking system here for this project. It was pretty funny because it only would track 1 point. And so I had to hide my other hand. It gets really awkward in a little while because I have to bend down and I have to keep my hand. Anyway, okay. Shooting forward a decade, this is a project with Zach and oh, sorry. Let me just go ahead. Okay, that's not a project. Okay, so this is a project with Zach and Joan LaBarbera and Jaap Blanc from 2003, and we did it again in 2009. It's called Messa de Voce, and it's a performance which is about visualizing the speech, songs, shouts, and barks of 2 really phenomenal abstract vocalists. They make funny sounds with their mouths for a living. They're genuinely expert at it. And the challenge that Zach and I gave ourselves was, could we make a visual system that was as plastic, as fluid, as responsive, and in some ways as graphically virtuosic as they were in their medium, which was their voice. That was the challenge. I'll talk a little bit about how it worked. Here's Jaap. He's making a special sound. I'll play it for you in a moment, but he calls it his cheek synthesizer. And it sounds like this. Okay, and with each cheek flap, he emits one of these balls. There he is on. This is the premiere in Ars Electronica. He's got this big screen, it's like 60 feet wide. There's a computer vision system which is tracking his head to find out where his head is. There's an audio system which is listening to his wireless mic, and there's a computer graphics system which is then listening to those 2 forms of input and projecting graphics so as to coincide with the apparent point from which the graphics ought to be emitted. In ways that are tightly coupled to whatever he's doing with his voice. So that's one sort of basic way that the concert works. It was a performance and later an installation, as you'll see. And we came up with about 15 different scenes or visual metaphors for ways of visualizing the speech and songs of these performers. So this one here, for example, is a voice-sensitive costume that Joan is wearing. This is a voice-generated environment where she produces these columns that reproduce her sounds in space. This is an early use of Joost Stam's fluid code in a kind of interactive context. This is one where they can paint gestures or gestural marks with their voice by making rising and falling tones. And here's a couple quick scenes. So it may be just worth pointing out that as the sounds fall, they release the sounds that he had stored inside them. So I don't just think the absurd is important, I think it's crucially important. In this case here, this scene kind of gives another approach to that. In this one here, it's kind of a David Attenborough situation. He's speaking in an abstract form of Dutch. So he's sort of narrating the behavior of this creature and talking about that. As Zach mentioned today in our panel, we work often back and forth between performance and installation. Performance is wonderful. You can really work with experts like Jaap and Joan, and who can sort of give an audience like yourselves a vicarious experience, a vicarious interaction, and tease out aspects of the interactive system or the interactions that one wouldn't necessarily get to experience oneself as a casual visitor. At the same time, there's really nothing quite as satisfying as having children or other people experience the work for themselves and really have a first-hand encounter with an interactive system that teaches them something new about themselves. The following video has a crucial moment for me where a child really discovers himself or discovers new aspects of himself as a creative actor. So here's a version of the video of the installation from France. French kids, it turns out, all learned to sing. This kid's about 6. There's something very important happening here. I think there's something very important and basic about the written mark, and this comes back again and again in this work as well. We'll be seeing some more of that tonight. I'd just like to show another project that also uses, or is done with Jaap. He's a real interesting guy. He's a world expert in performing this poem, this Dada poem from the early 20th century called the Sonata, which is a 45-minute long tour de force of pure abstract poetry written by Kurt Schwitters between 1919 and 1929. And the poem is basically like 45 minutes of strictly patterned nonsense. Jaap is one of the probably about 10 people in the whole world who've got the whole thing memorized almost flawlessly and can perform it from memory. This presented a unique situation because when someone has a text like that memorized so well, you can take advantage of that to create kind of a unique interactive scenario. In this case, this is a performance called Ursonography, which presents real-time interactive subtitles that basically replay the exact text of the poem as Jaap delivers it. Completely unconstrained speech recognition is still a little ways off, although we're getting close. But it's much more possible when you have a fixed text. So in this case, we hooked up a score follower to a syllable detector that was basically listening carefully to Jaap and sort of counting off syllables as he would march through the poem, and basically deliver the right text at the right time. So the setup looks a bit like this. He's off to the side. He's being looked at by a camera. As he delivers the poem, it's being projected on top of him. And I'm off to the side, basically making sure that nothing screws up. So in the rare event that he forgets a line, but more likely than that, imagine yourself that computer speech recognition syllable detection is 95% accurate. And you're like, great, that sounds fantastic, except it's a 45-minute long thing with about 5,000 syllables. So you're looking at several hundred instances where the computer could mess up and misestimate that. But here's a quick clip of that.
Lankatrgl, pepe, oka, Lankatrgl, bibi, zuka, Lankatrgl, rump, Lankatrgl, ziulentrl, lymph, Lankatrgl, rumpftilipto, Lankatrgl, ziulentrl, lymph, Lankatrgl, pepe, oka, Lankatrgl, bibi, zuka, Lankatrgl, rump, Lankatrgl.
So there you're seeing the text basically presented. Thanks. Presented in real time in a way that no teletyper could do. It's a kind of a visualization, and it's a visualization of what he's saying. This is another kind of visualization. In this case, it's a project called Ghost Pole Propagator, which analyzes people's skeletons using a lovely visual transformation called the medial axis transform. It does exactly what it says. It finds you the medial axis. And it's actually a profoundly interesting transformation of a person because it eliminates all of the sort of unnecessary, icky detail about what you actually look like while preserving this fantastic quality of how you move and the kind of posture you have in moving. It maintains the gait, enough of a person's gait that you can actually tell who someone might be by the way that they walked and less by their appearance. And to me, that's a really fascinating situation. So in this way, it's a visualization of what's essential, which gains its power by omitting information, a key principle of abstraction. And it's as much an instrumental performance situation as it is a poetic surveillance tool. So you can see him there. There's sort of some other recordings of people sort of maintained in the situation. I'm going to talk now for a bit about this kind of gesture in relationship to machine automation. As Brian Eno said, take something and do it once, it's okay. Do it, it's idiosyncratic. Repeat it, it becomes, and make it mechanical, it somehow obtains a new kind of power. That's a terrible paraphrase. All right, so gesture and automation. I'm interested now in this situation of robots and machines, or humans and machines that are relating to each other, particularly in a way that they can kind of look at each other, return each other's gaze, and share kind of a moment of nonverbal communication, such as we have with our eyes. A first project was called Opto-Isolator. There's Marius. And this is a robot that tries to return your gaze by engaging in a variety of familiar sort of psychosocial eye contact behaviors. It tracks your body from across the room. As you get closer, it finds your head. As you get closer, it finds your face. As you get closer, it finds your eyes. And then it makes a pretty lousy attempt to also look where you're looking if it can estimate where you're doing so. Here's a video. Some very loud servos. One thing it does is it gets your mirror neurons firing. If you blink, it blinks 1 second later. Makes you feel like it's kind of sympathetic. This would have been hella easier with the Kinect. Really bad. Later on, another version that has a mirrored body whose reflective design sets up kind of a physical pun. Apparently placing the sculpture's eye in the center of the observer's own head. Here's a close-up of that. So another project involving eyes is this one here. It's called Double Taker. It's an enormous 8-foot-tall robot, lives on top of a building, and it tries to present the feeling that it's constantly surprised to see you. So it's called Double Taker because it does double takes, basically. And what's going on there is there's an 8-foot industrial robot arm on the inside. Here's a picture through the window where the computer's located. And inside this, it's basically sort of like doing a real-time character animation where it sort of looks at you and kind of tries to kind of look at you from different points of view. And if it's done its job, and if I've done my job in terms of doing this kind of real-time character animation, it makes you feel like it's kind of looking you over, checking you out, and it kind of looks at you, kind of looks away, and goes, huh? Oh, maybe I missed something. And when it comes back and returns its gaze to you, you feel like, what is it, my hair? Like, was it my shoes? It's kind of like that. So a couple little quick inside views. This is the view out the window where the camera's located. This would have been easier with the Kinect too. Those of you who know what you're looking at, you know that up there on the right-hand side, upper right, that's the depth image. That's calculated in this case with a stereo camera, the Bumblebee. Boy, that would have been easier. This little puppy over here, this little green fella, that's the mock-up in processing that I made that indicates what the computer thinks it's doing and where it thinks it's looking around. Here's another picture of that in terms of the nerds out there who want to understand what it's doing. It's basically trying to find the two people who are moving around the most and kind of look back and forth between them, sort of choose who to look at. Here's a video. Sort of somewhere between Big Brother and Sesame Street. These kids have been going to school every day with this thing, so they're used to it already. They do see it. You know. Actually, the thing I'm so sad about, apparently, they're on their way to art class, Sunday school art class with this thing. And apparently one of them drew the robot with a pink laser shooting out of its eye. And I didn't get the drawing. More than anything, I wish I had that drawing. It's another talk, but this is inspired in part by, does anyone know Mummenschanz? I saw them when I was 6 in New York City, and it's one of these lasting impressions. They have a human costume like this that I saw when I was 6 years old, and it has stuck with me, and it really kind of informed a lot of my aesthetic goals for this in terms of both the absurdity of this thing as a machine, but also the pure simple form of this as a creature. Robots are basically just mechanical cartoons, and in thinking about how to animate them, I return back to my well-loved copy of The Illusion of Life, and there's a lot of great wisdom here. Maybe one piece of wisdom I'll share with this, which is more about eye contact as it applies to the previous robot, which is that Frank Thomas has these rules for animating people's eyes. And the way to animate someone's eyes is, he says, 3 frames before an accent, they should blink. By accent, he means like an event. Okay? So if I'm going to do this, okay, you actually blinked 3 frames, or in other words, 3/30ths of a second, or about 1/10 of a second. You blinked about 1/10 of a second before I actually did that, because you all are smart and you're able to have predictive capacity. So try to make a robot to do that, you need a time machine, or unbelievable artificial intelligence to do it. So it's hard to make a robot that can really predict things 1/10 of a second even into the future, but we try. I'm going to show a project now that Eyeo Watson was the lead on, and actually it's part of the iWriter crew's work. Just to show more about how the community sort of operates when you've done something. As Zach, we'll talk about, I'm sure tomorrow. The iWriter project is a really highly well-regarded project that presents an open-source eye tracker that was made for a disabled graffiti artist. I'm not on the crew, but after I made the Snout project you just saw, Eyeo invited me to help take the iWriter and allow it to transform into something where a person with their eyes could control a robotic arm to make drawings that one had made with one's eyes. So what we're seeing here is the iWriter. This is at the Cinekid Festival last November. The iWriter is on the left-hand side, and with your eyes you do a drawing, or you write a message by picking out some letters, and then the robot arm off to the right actually writes it. And it was literally just a fairly straightforward matter. The robot was written in Open Frameworks. It was just literally a matter of taking the Open Frameworks code, kind of giving it to Eyeo and the folks in Holland, and putting it together. So this is Chris Segru. She's one of the main engineers on the iWriter project. And in this case, she's recording a message with her eyes. She's doing some PEC typing, and she's spelling iWriter. Calibration first. Here's the typewriter that she's using with the iWriter project. I'm not tipping too much, Zach. No, it's good. So, I think that the significant thing about one of the many significant things about the iWriter is that it takes technology that really should cost $50 and allows it to cost $50 instead of the $40,000 and up that commercial eye trackers cost for a population that really can't afford it. So that's not my work, it's those guys. But yeah, it's and here, that's just then giving a kind of a real-time prosthetic arm to people who are using the iWriter system as a way of sort of stimulating thinking at the CineKid conference festival. The CineKid's a fantastic festival of kids media, and it's one of the many new media festivals and other kinds of arts organizations in Holland, which is slated to be completely defunded. So if you see the petition going around to not defund Dutch arts, this is the kind of thing that is affected by that. There it goes. The project you just saw encodes the visitor's drawings using an open specification format called GML, or Graffiti Markup Language, which was created by Evan Roth, one of the members of the Graffiti Research Lab, and founder of something called Fat Lab, of which I and Zach and Theo and several others are members. Graffiti Markup Language is this open format, as I mentioned, that encodes a gestural mark, and it has become an open platform for experimenting with different kinds of mark-making technologies and urban mark-making technologies. And he's made he and many others, and myself included, have made a number of different systems for recording, capturing, translating, and repositioning and reprojecting graffiti markup language marks back into the world. And in closing up, I'd like to show three graffiti markup language projects that I've been working on. The first is brand new, no one's seen it. And it's so new it doesn't even have a title. Looks like this. I'm going to have to crack it open, and it's going to take a moment to load. Let's get to it. Here we go. Okay, so what you're seeing over here on the left is 10,000 marks from graffiti markup language. They've been measured according to 30 different metrics for how you would talk about gestural marks. Some simple things like the number of strokes, the number of self-intersections, and then some measures that I've gotten from the literature. There's actually a measure called kinkiness. There's a measure called curliness. There's a measure called waviness. Various kinds of things like area to perimeter ratio and so forth. And with these 30 different metrics, these are boiled down to a three-dimensional space through a process called singular value decomposition, which is the bomb. And really awesome. I was really psyched to learn about it. So by doing this, it basically projects them down to the three most significant dimensions. And once you do that, you can sort of look at shapes and pick them and find the ones that are most similar to it. So out of the collection of around 10,000 that I happen to have loaded up over here, you can sort of pick around in the space and find, well, I don't know what it's going to do there. Okay, let's just pick some more. There ends up being kind of a statistical gestalt where one given mark is sort of similar to all these other ones. Let's pick some of the ones over here. I'm having good luck picking these today. I feel like I got the mojo. So some of those, let's go over here. You guys get the idea. All right. Anyway, there's lots to explore here, and this will be online soon. This was if we get over to the extreme ends of the space, I'll just kind of, like as usual, like the space is like really well described by the extrema. You get like something like this, and it's just like totally thatchy. It's a really interesting space to explore. So I'm moments away from just having finished coding it to the point where you could actually draw your own mark in here and find the ones that are similar to that. Oh, look, there I am. Hasn't been done. Got to spend the night in a hotel and fix that up. But that's just one little project I wanted to show you involving a visualization of graffiti. So whereas earlier I showed you sort of InfoVis graffiti, this is graffiti InfoVis, thinking about how to understand this space of marks that people have made. Thanks. Thanks. This was almost but not quite commissioned by Mozilla. It's a long story. It was really sad. But Evan finished the commission, and then there was a bit of a snafu over in the space of commercial web development that wasn't my fault. But Long story short, Evan's now collected about 250,000 tags. If you go to the Mozilla markup thing, you can sign your own signature and add it to a big database for sort of sign here if you support a free and open web. And I'll be using that database of 250,000 marks to put into this project. So I recommend you add your signature there. It's a great project. Back to the slides, just for a couple quick last things. Let me flip this over here, and get that. Just got 2 quick things to show you. All right. So we just finished this last week. This is a graffiti markup language controlling a Roomba. It's writing out "Hello World" from a GML tag. That's my lab, CMU. So we're doing a bunch of GML tinkering. And this is entirely hacked with processing in an Arduino. The Arduino is talking to the Roomba. It's actually the hobbyist version. It's less expensive than the vacuum. It's basically like the vacuum without the actual sucker part. So it's just the wheels. And it's like $150. They're easy to get and easy to hack. So there's a little Arduino piggyback on top of it, telling the robot where to go around. Graffiti robots are nothing new. Rich Pell with the Institute for Applied Autonomy made a great one circa the year 1999, 2000. What I'm imagining for this is to kind of go back into that sort of space of locative graffiti or situated visualization. With the addition of a $70 GPS module, a paint can, and a suitable getaway timer, this same kit could be used tactically for locative visualizations at 1-to-1 scale. So this mock-up, for example, chart illustrates situated statistics available from public records like energy consumption on a per household basis, or Natalie's leaf area index, for example, for, in this case, a row of suburban houses. So we're getting there. The last project I'd like to show you is in process, and it's not going to be ready till the end of 2013. My lab, the Studio for Creative Inquiry at Carnegie Mellon, is working in collaboration with the CMU Robotics Institute and a company called Astrobotic. They are competing for the $25 million Google X Prize to be the first non-governmental organization to get a robot to the moon. And if they get the robot to actually get onto the moon and do some tricks, then once they've achieved that, then they're going to give us the keys. And we get to actually drive this robot around, do a bunch of different things with it. And so we have a project called the Moon Arts Project. I'm one of the artists in it, and then my lab is sort of supporting it. And this project is basically a suite of different artworks that are going to be executed in, on, and around the moon with this robot. So for example, one thing the robot will have is a little vial, sealed, containing DNA from all the world's organisms and a variety of other projects. But the one that I want to tell you about is one in which this robot's actually drawing GML marks on the surface of the moon with its treads. And the proposal is to have kind of a web applet, some kind of processing thing that people can draw. Maybe children from all over the world will contribute drawings, and that these will be voted on by the internet, and a jury of distinguished artists and philosophers and scientists, and that the 10 favorite drawings will be rendered on the moon in this kind of anamorphic perspective that allows them to be photographed and transmitted back to us. It's sort of a no-joke thing, though, because the moon's interesting. It has no weather. So anything that does get drawn up there is going to last a really long time. Well beyond our lifetimes, and probably more like tens of thousands of years until like an asteroid gets in the way. So it's possible that these marks could last longer than the pyramids if we do it right. Anyway, that's the last project I wanted to show you. Thank you.